Good evening, I'm Anthony Robart. This is Crime Beat, the stories behind some of Canada's most high-profile homicides, told by the reporters who walk the beat every day, and the families demanding answers. We'll reveal the shocking evidence as it was uncovered by investigators in their quest for justice. Tonight, a young woman vanishes.
I ran into her bedroom, her purse was there, her phone was there.
There was no real reason for her just to pick up and leave and go somewhere without letting somebody know.
I knew something was very wrong.
We have our search teams out, our canine unit.
She had no enemies, so we can't figure out why.
Here's Crime Beat reporter Catherine McDonald with a story of Alicia Ross, everyone's daughter.
Alicia's mom says her daughter had the bluest eyes. Except when she laughed or cried. That's when Alicia's eyes would turn green. Alicia laughed a lot that summer. She was 25 years old and excited about the future. She'd spent a year in Australia following undergrad and had recently moved home to a suburb north of Toronto. Alicia always had a no-fear attitude. As a chubby baby, a precocious toddler, and later, as her mom put it, as a terrible teenager. That summer, Alicia had been doing what she loved most, camping in northern Ontario.
It gives me a feeling of warmth when a mother or a grandmother will say to me, "Oh, my grandson went to camp with Alicia. He said she was the best tripper because she was an expert canoeist, and she was the one who took all the kids on canoe trip."
She just got back from a canoe trip to Algonquin Park with her brother. It was a hot summer, a bad year for bugs. But Alicia was tough, braving the onslaught of mosquitoes and even portaging in her bare feet.
They told me it was a very hard portage. It had rained and the ground was very mucky. It was a tough one.
I have to say that was a damn nice portage. Can't feel my shoulders, but I'm loving it.
When you look at that video, you see how happy she was. It was just happy. I look at it and I see happy.
It was August 2005.
It was a lovely summer and everyone was happy. The kids were all good. A happy time until the day. I had come home. I was tired, and Alicia came home and said, "I'm going to be interviewed tomorrow. I'm so excited. There's something new happening at work. I'm pretty sure I'm moving up." So we took the dogs, and I said, "Well, the dogs need to be walked. Let's go." And we walked and walked. We went over all her notes. It was a great time. And then I had to go out and run some errands with a friend, and when I came home I was so tired and decided I'm going to go to bed early. And I think it was the first time in many years that I ever went to bed early. And the last time I saw Alicia, she asked to borrow a purse and gave it to her, and we waved goodnight at the stairs, and then I went to bed.
She had a date that night, right?
She did. She'd been seeing a boy, and I think he was over that when I went to bed. They were in her room in the basement.
So that was it? You went to bed?
I went to bed.
So Sean was Alicia's boyfriend at the time. They were together on August 16th in the evening.
Sean told police they'd burnt CDs and played pool. They'd had a little wine.
Her room had access through a door at the rear of the residence. There was a ground level entrance into her basement room. They were at the residence together, and in and around 11 o'clock midnight, it was our understanding that he left the residence. They were at the side of the road. They said goodbye to each other, and he left for the evening.
We got up and we were golfing in some kind of tournament, my husband and I and friends. I saw Alicia's car in the driveway, and I thought it was odd. that maybe she'd slept in. So off we went.
Until Sharon got an urgent call from Alicia's boyfriend.
He was the one who reported her missing. He had made a phone call when he got home to Alicia where there was no response. He phoned in the morning. He called her work. He couldn't locate her.
Sharon will never forget that call.
I know exactly where it was. It was the 7th hole on the east course at the country club. Very bad reception. My phone rang. And all I could hear was, the police are here. I don't know what's going on. She's missing. I couldn't make out a lot of the words, but I heard the word police. And I said to my husband, I have to go home.
She rushed home to find police at her house.
And Sean, the boy Alicia had been seeing, was pacing and frantic. He told me he tried to call her. No answer. Called.
Alicia had not turned up at work. She worked at Hewlett-Packard, despite joking with her family that she knew nothing about computers.
I ran into her bedroom. Her purse was there. Her phone was there. The laundry that she'd been in the middle of folding was there.
None of her, her keys to her car, her wallet, her identification, and items that most people would take with them were still at the house.
And of course there was the cigarette butt, the glass of wine, and the shoe in the backyard. When I looked over the back balcony and saw them, I knew something was very wrong. Any mother who looks at a room where her child lives and sees things that shouldn't still be there at 9 or 10 in the morning, and to see a shoe, just things strewn about, it wasn't right.
And the reports were that she just disappeared that evening or that night prior to, and the circumstances surrounding the scene indicated that she was missing under suspicious circumstances.
And I called my husband and I said, you have to come home right now.
He phoned in the morning. He called her work. He couldn't locate her.
Coming up after the break.
Group A. Group B.
A massive search with few leads. Tonight on Crime Beat, 25-year-old Alicia Ross disappears from her home under suspicious circumstances. The last person who says they saw Alicia is her boyfriend, Sean. Now back to Catherine McDonald with the story of Alicia Ross, everyone's daughter.
What's happening is we haven't found Alicia, and that's our main goal right now, okay? I'm so emotional right now, like, this is breaking my heart.
Tell me about the last time you saw her and what it was like against you.
I loved her.
Sean Hine was 29 years old at the time. He and Alicia had been seeing each other for a month and a half when she went missing.
Everything seemed to be good in her life. There was no real reason for her just to pick up and leave and go somewhere without letting somebody know. We would start from ground zero, 11 o'clock, midnight at that night. We would have officers or investigators knocking on doors and investigating and determining where they were, what they were doing, what they heard, what they may have observed, anything that could give us a timeline and investigate a timeline for Alicia's movements throughout the day and into the evening, and then hours throughout the night. Again, and the canvas is crucial.
At this point in the investigation, it was a suspicious disappearance. Police could not yet say if foul play was involved. The priority was to find Alicia and to find her alive.
We have our search teams out, our canine unit, our helicopters assisting, and I'm sure as some of you have seen, we're searching the immediate area and we'll expand the search as we deem necessary.
Having covered dozens of missing persons cases over the years, I know those first 24 to 48 hours after a person is reported missing are critical. This was no different. And based on the police response to Alicia's disappearance, it was clear there was real concern. Neighbors were also feeling anxious about a fact that a woman who could have been anyone's daughter had vanished.
It's been bothering me, like I just can't sleep at night. I'm just thinking of it. Did you have kids? I have kids out that age.
Can you hear me out at the back?
Area residents were asked to help with the ground search, and the response was overwhelming.
Group A, Group B, Group B.
We had never seen anything to this scale, to this magnitude. It was positive in that there were so many people that came forward to support Alicia's family and to support us as a police service. Nothing that I can ever recall, even to this day, has 14 years later been as grandiose as that search effort.
It soon turned into one of the largest missing person searches in Ontario history.
Organizing that was difficult. The community was really engaged and involved, and it affected the community, I believe. Members of the community were constantly coming out, asking to help out and assist in any way. It was a family-oriented neighborhood. I think it was a young woman who was in the beginning of her adult life, where she was a very attractive young lady. I think she just caught the eye of the community.
But Alicia's mom still worried maybe they weren't doing enough.
I remember I went to Costco with a ton of flyers and there were none out. And I spoke to the manager and I said, "Why don't you have these flyers out?" And he said to me, "Take it easy, we've run out." Hundreds of people had all taken the flyers to put them out everywhere. And I just said, "I'm so sorry." Oh my gosh, I think I was just walking through a haze at the time. But I was desperate. Desperate.
4 days after they last saw Alicia, her parents decided it was time to speak publicly.
We pray Alicia is home soon, so this can be old news. Alicia, I've never broken a promise to you, and I promise you, you will come home soon. Thank you.
Sharon believed that Alicia had been kidnapped, that she was being held captive. The cops' working theory was that she knew her captor. Alicia had lots of friends. She was popular at school and knew most of the people in the neighborhood from growing up there.
Somebody just didn't come from outside the community or outside a greater area and focus in on Alicia and take her away that night. So was it somebody close by? Was it a friend? Was it an associate? Was it an ex-boyfriend?
As every day passed, the speculation grew. How did Alicia simply disappear? Where had she gone? And if foul play was involved, why? And why Alicia?
I woke up from a nap one afternoon. It was very early, I think the first week. And I thought I saw her in the doorway of my room. I was sort of half asleep and I said, "Where are you?" And then I went back to sleep. That's all we wanted to know. Where are you?
There was no question that this was foul play. Hundreds of tips and clues were pursued, but almost a week of searching had turned up nothing, and suspicion was starting to fall on one individual.
A lot of people have been talking about Sean, her.
Oh, I wouldn't want to put blame on anyone at this point. I honestly have no idea. I don't know him well at all, other than my daughter was dating him. That's all I know. I don't know anything else.
Sean Hine, Alicia's boyfriend, the last person who reported seeing her alive, and the one who first called 911 to report her missing. For police, something felt off to them with his story. Like, why call 911 before checking with Alicia's family? Why was he so certain she was missing?
Sean was a person of interest off the beginning of this investigation.
I remember the interview that we did with him as he was leaving the house. Of course, he looked distraught. He didn't want to talk, particularly. Obviously, being the last person that had seen Alicia, did he become a person of interest?
Absolutely. He's the last person to see Alicia. We needed to speak with him.
Sean Hine lived by himself nearby in Richmond Hill. Since Alicia vanished, the family felt Sean had become less cooperative with police. He told them he was grief-stricken and didn't want to talk.
We spoke to Sean on multiple occasions. We wanted to clarify things. We wanted to make sure that we could absolutely eliminate or clear Sean Hine as being involved, or identify him as a suspect through proper collection of evidence.
Oh, Liz! As every day passed, the family became more concerned something terrible had happened. It was hard not to wonder if Sean Hine was telling police the whole story. It was at this time that Alicia's mother finally called me directly and invited me into her home to discuss Alicia's disappearance. As a reporter, it was a good call to get. But walking into the family home that day was very difficult. Meeting with the family of a missing person is a delicate situation, and I felt as if I already knew so much about Alicia, but was anxious to learn more. Sharon was remarkably composed, though fragile. We connected immediately. She was still so hopeful Alicia would be found alive.
This is a living hell. This is a nightmare that I wake up to every morning. I don't go to bed and dream it. It's there when I wake up. It's a deep, horrible pain. She had no enemies, so we can't figure out why, and the why is just unanswered question. Why? I do pray every day, all day, please just spare this girl.
Sharon's resolve to find Alicia alive was clear. 1 month after Alicia went missing, I returned. Sharon was now coming to terms with a different reality.
I just want her back. You know, people say, well, she wants her back alive. Well, either way, this family needs closure.
Now prepared to admit her daughter may have met with foul play.
Woody!
Sharon started to tell me personal things about Alicia that could help identify her.
Alicia does have 2 tattoos, and I really want the public to know about them. She's a tattoo of a daisy on her ankle, and the Aquarius sign is on her top vertebrae, and this is what it looks like.
A candle flickered on the front step of the family doorstep. Sharon was now prepared for any clue that would bring an end to her suffering. I left the family home that day feeling upset and anxious for this lovely woman who I'd come to know on a personal level, not realizing that there was about to be a huge break in this case.
Coming up after the break, a massive search has turned up nothing. Hundreds of people have been interviewed, the area canvassed, but the answers they're looking for are closer than they realize. Tonight on Crime Beat, It's been a month since 25-year-old Alicia Ross went missing. A massive search has turned up nothing. But the answers they're looking for are closer than they realize. Now back to Catherine McDonald with the story of Alicia Ross, everyone's daughter.
Relatives of Alicia Ross leave her family's Thornhill home, unwilling to talk to the media. 5 weeks after the 25-year-old vanished from her home in this quiet, upper-middle-class neighborhood, it now appears the clue to her disappearance lies in the next-door neighbor's home.
It was a phone call later in the day. It wasn't anything out of ordinary, except the investigation now has kind of halted. Our search for Alicia had slowed down, and this phone call changes the whole investigation on we're going to get answers.
How did you find out?
How did I find out? I was on my way somewhere in my car, and my cell phone rang, and it was my husband, and he said they found her. He didn't say she's alive, he just said they found her. And at that point, after that long, I knew, I don't know if we knew, but I knew she was gone. Well, when I came home, I ran into the house, and they said it was the guy next door. And I just said, why? Why?
I remember thinking as I drove to Markham with my cameraman that day, had I knocked on the next-door neighbor's door? Had I seen him? We soon learned the next-door neighbor was Daniel Sylvester. He lived in a big brick house next door with his mother. It's unlikely police would have made an arrest at this point in the Alicia Ross case had the 31-year-old not surrendered himself to police. Investigators say it was 5 p.m. Tuesday when Daniel Sylvester, in the company of his lawyer, came to this Newmarket detachment and turned himself over to police.
Something triggered him that he needed to speak to the police about his interactions with Alicia that night. It's huge. It's a huge component here.
Daniel Sylvester confessed. He told police he was responsible for the disappearance and killing of Alicia Ross, but insisted her death was an accident.
My client was very distraught. He had been emotional for some long period of time. He was extremely remorseful and had been for some period of time. He wanted to make matters right. He regretted deeply that he had been responsible for no closure on the part of the deceased family. That weighed on his conscience terribly, and he was also concerned that the wrong person might be investigated and charged.
Daniel Sylvester led investigators to 2 areas northeast of Toronto. After cleaning up the bloody scene with towels, showering, and bagging the evidence, Sylvester told police he had moved Alicia's body that night to Manila, Ontario, about an hour's drive away. A judge with the Ontario Superior Court describes how Daniel Sylvester says he placed the body of Alicia Ross into the trunk of his car, then dumped it in a bush at the side of a country road. Then, on his way back to Markham, Sylvester described tossing the bags of clothing a few kilometers away from the first site, also in a bush area. Three weeks later, with the police search well underway, Daniel Sylvester says he moved Alicia's remains to Coboconk, another 40 minutes drive north, close to where his family owned a cottage.
The worst situation possible. The officers who were engaged in that process, very difficult for them, and very difficult to go and speak with the family and explain what happened to Alicia that night is difficult on the investigators and the officers. It's always difficult because the worst thing is happening to the family at this point, and most of us have never been through this, and we don't know what that feeling truly is, and we're the ones giving them that news, and it's horrific, it's terrible, and a whole lot of questions come up and a whole lot of feelings, and just don't understand, and it's just the beginning.
Even though they had lived next door to each other for around 7 years, Alicia's mom said she had only encountered Daniel Sylvester a handful of times. Gradually, details began to emerge about this man next door, the 31-year-old who lived at home with his mother. Investigators said he had spent a lot of time at home alone, watching TV. He didn't have a job. Neighbors say he could be seen at night working in an upstairs window on a computer, and that he'd work out in a home gym. He described himself as a fringe individual with a history of anxiety and depression. I talked to one woman who lived across the street, one of the few neighbors who knew Daniel Sylvester.
I knew Daniel a bit, and I knew his mother more, but he was a nice guy. I mean, he was very polite to us, and I don't understand how he just went off the deep end, I guess. But I didn't know he was like he was. Like the way he was peeping Toms and all that.
A peeping Tom who confessed to spying on his neighbors. Suddenly, a different image of Alicia's killer was starting to emerge. I know from talking to Sharon, she told me that he was a bit weird. Mm-hmm. Did she indicate that to you?
Not to me.
Or to the police? Did she tell anyone, like, there's this neighbor, this guy next door seems a little weird or off?
Not that I recall. Okay. I do know that as a result of our canvass, officers would come back and say, you know what, I don't want to say weird, it's just that we got to clarify a few things. This person was up. This person may have heard something. This person may be involved. But we need to speak with this person and either clear them or identify them as a person of interest, or potentially, if evidence is there, a suspect.
Coming up, was Alicia's death an accident, as her neighbor claims? Or had he been stalking her and planning his move for months? After the break, a killer's confession.
Welcome back to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. The next-door neighbor has admitted to killing 25-year-old Alicia Ross, and now the family is hoping the trial will help them understand why. We return now to Catherine McDonald with the story of Alicia Ross, everyone's daughter.
On a rainy day in October, hundreds packed a North York synagogue to say goodbye to Alicia.
I love this picture.
It was 2 months after that service that Sharon invited me back to her home to reflect on Alicia's life and what led to the break in the case.
The last photos I have of Alicia are on canoe trips with her brother. You can't live in fear. Alicia traveled all over the world. Nothing happened to her camping out in the Negev in Israel. But in her own backyard, this is what happened.
It was during this meeting with Alicia's mom that I learned more about the police investigation and how Daniel Sylvester came to confess.
They had questioned him several times, and on the last interview asked him to take a lie detector test, and he refused. And that's when they advised him that they would start really looking at him very closely. And the next thing we knew, he came forward.
So the canvass led to identifying the neighbor, Daniel Sylvester.
According to court documents, police questioned Daniel Sylvester in relation to Alicia's disappearance. He told them he had been home all evening and could not assist. The next day, on August 18th, he told a homicide detective that he had never spoken with Alicia and was not outside his residence during the relevant time frame.
We identified that he was a night hawk. He likes to be up. He slept all day, was up in the evening, goes outside, likes to walk around the house, took his car for a drive, his mom's car, I believe, for a drive in the early morning hours, which to us kind of stood out like, who does that? Ultimately, we would ask for certain, a polygraph and get a formal video statement and clarify their actions that night. He initially agreed to it and ultimately contacted us and said his lawyer advised him not to take a polygraph. Investigators went back and he ultimately agreed to a polygraph again and then spoke to a lawyer and then declined to take the polygraph. And then contact was made to us that Daniel, the next door neighbor, wanted to come in and speak to us in regards to this incident.
I remember my story that day was go find Sean Hine. And I remember finding him on a bike, and he was going through a bank ATM on his bike.
How do you feel knowing that they've arrested someone and all along you maintained your innocence?
Yeah, well, I only tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so I'm glad this guy, felt guilty enough to turn himself in.
His lawyer mentioned that he worried that someone else was going to bear the brunt of the blame and he couldn't bear that. How did that feel when you heard that?
Well, I felt better. I felt better because if anyone knows what anxiety is, it's anxiety. Wow. It gets the best of you sometimes.
Are you going to go to court, Sean?
I'm going to be there every step of the way, just like I would have been if she was alive, so that's it.
Daniel Sylvester was arrested in September of 2005, but the family had to wait until this moment, 2 years later, for the Crown to publicly reveal what led up to their daughter's murder.
A shocking day in court for the family of Alicia Ross. Inside, a videotaped police interview with Daniel Sylvester was played, showing Sylvester confessing to the murder of his neighbor. On the tape, Sylvester first cries, then in an excited, stressed voice, he reenacts the fatal beating.
There to witness Daniel Sylvester's testimony were his brother and mother. In his confession, Daniel Sylvester told police he'd encountered Alicia at her gate between their houses, that she'd said to him, "What the are you doing here?" To which he responded, "I've got as much right to be here as you do." She said, "Off, you loser." Then he told police he advanced on her. The court heard that Daniel Sylvester was a self-admitted recluse who suffered from depression. He said when Alicia called him a loser, he could not control himself. The Crown said Daniel Sylvester's attack was sexually motivated. A psychiatrist testified that Daniel Sylvester told him that he was a longtime peeping Tom who enjoyed spying on neighbors while they were being intimate. Despite confessing to manslaughter, Daniel Sylvester pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder.
It surprised me a little bit that there isn't a guilty plea, but I know that they're trying for their best opportunity.
According to the Crown, the extent of Alicia's injuries told a different story.
I know the autopsy results, and the injuries were pretty violent and significant, which would result into a little bit more further assaultive actions than just an accident that occurred.
The jury was told that Alicia's injuries resembled more those of a car crash victim than a beating victim, which made determining the exact cause of death difficult.
It was blunt trauma. It was undetermined due to Alicia's remains not being in a perfect state for the coroner or the pathologist. But ultimately, it was undetermined, but as a result of forced blunt trauma.
The trial was hard. I think it was hard for everyone sitting in that room. They showed there were 32 broken bones, and they showed every bone and the forensic pathologist would go over the details of every bone. And then the last photo was her skull. And I just stared at it. And I think everyone in the room was horrified, but I wasn't. I just kept staring at it. This is the last time I'm going to see that. And I didn't want him to turn off the screen, but the screen was turned off and we all got up and left.
Day after day, more details were revealed.
The details were hard, but in a way I think we were all hungry to know the details. So as the details came out, you get some details made me so angry. But you know, my brother at the time said, "Why do you have to go every day? You don't have to go every day." I said, "Oh, I have to go every day. She's my baby. You would go every day for your baby." So I did. She was my daughter, and I couldn't desert her.
Coming up, in the conclusion of Alicia Ross, Everyone's Daughter, a verdict is reached as the healing process begins. Welcome back. Daniel Sylvester is on trial for killing his neighbor Alicia Ross. Charged with second-degree murder, he maintains the brutal beating was an accident. Now back to Catherine McDonald with the conclusion of Alicia Ross, Everyone's Daughter.
On May 29, 2007, jurors reached a verdict. It took them mere hours to decide. Daniel Sylvester was found guilty of second-degree murder.
The pain of our loss will never go away. It is with us every day. But you believed in the truth and delivered a verdict that now helps all of us to move forward to the day when we hope memories will be cherished happy times rather than painful reminders of how Alicia died.
Daniel Sylvester was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole until 2021. Delivering his sentence, the judge felt that the vicious beating was sexually motivated and that Daniel Sylvester had been watching Ross for some time that night.
It's a very bittersweet thing to hear a number, because although we were very glad to hear a murder conviction, the number of years nothing will bring Alicia back.
Daniel Sylvester would go on to appeal his conviction, asking for a reduced sentence, but the original verdict and sentence were upheld. Today, it's the parole hearing that looms.
I hope people remember her. Not so much the case. I get worried sometimes that people will forget, you know, to not mention a person or reminisce about a person almost negates their existence. And it gives me a feeling of warmth when a mother or a grandmother will say to me, "Oh, my grandson went to camp with Alicia. He said she was the best tripper," because she was an expert canoeist. And oh, I love hearing stories like that people remember her and remember her well. Why she grabbed the province's heart, I don't know. I think people said to me, she's everyone's daughter.
To honor Alicia's legacy as an expert paddler, her family created a memorial fund with the charity Project Canoe. It's a charity supporting youth who would not otherwise have a chance to get out of the city and experience a canoe trip in Northern Ontario, the place where Alicia was most at peace.
How have you been able to move forward? We talk about over the years how people got to know you. They felt like they knew you.
In the beginning, a lot of people recognized me. I felt it very discomforting. I didn't like it. The odd time still, someone will say, "Don't I know you from somewhere?" My back gets up and I don't like it. I don't like being recognized, and I don't want to have to say, well, I'm the woman whose daughter. So I'll just say, oh, you've probably seen me around. I've lived in Thornhill for so many years. I don't know that you ever move on. You move forward as best you can. You know the saying, one foot in front of the other. But when it comes back hard. You know, mourning is a group thing. You can mourn with your family. You can miss the person together. We all miss her. But sadness and sorrow is a very solitary thing.
I think there's a legacy to your daughter in many ways. What is her legacy in your mind?
She affected a number of people, which I really had no idea about until we went to visit where she had worked and clean out her desk, and people started approaching me that they'd helped her through a hard time. One had taken work off through depression and she kept in touch with him. So things that made me happy, people were telling me wonderful things she'd done to be supportive. That's her legacy.
Alicia's mom knows that her daughter's kindness, her adventurous spirit, her laughter live on in the memories of all the people she met over the years, even if it's not always easy to remember.
We don't talk about her a lot. We don't reminisce about her because it's too painful. Talking about Alicia is not a happy thing because unfortunately what happened to her overshadows anything else, and so it's too painful. Oh gosh, I haven't been in this box in a long time. The magazine. It's a tough thing, you know. I used to have tons of pictures out, and over the years we've taken many family photos. A friend of mine who lost her daughter said, everyone in the photos changes. We get older, there are more children, grandchildren, but they're stuck. She's stuck at 25. And so I have 1 or 2 pictures of her out, but the family photos I can't anymore. We've all, as you said, moved on. They never had the chance. They were taken too young, too soon. I would give anything. I would cut my life short just to have her again for 5 minutes.
This case will go down in history as one of the biggest missing person searches in Ontario, a community coming together under the most horrible circumstances. And with Daniel Sylvester's parole hearing coming up, family and friends of Alicia Ross just hope they don't have to relive it all over again. They remain focused on honoring Alicia's legacy. To pay tribute to Alicia's adventurous spirit and her love of nature, the family created a memorial fund with Project Canoe. This is a charity supporting youth who wouldn't otherwise have a chance to get out of the city and experience a canoe trip in Northern Ontario, the place where Alicia was most at peace. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
To hear more about other high-profile Canadian cases, Check out the podcast Crime Beat with me, Global News crime reporter Nancy Hixt. You can listen for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on CuriousCast.ca.